Welcome. Today, we're diving into the fifth part of the Qur'an, using a summary by Maulana Muhammad Ilyas Quman as our guide. We're going to uncover what's basically a blueprint for building a really just and harmonious society, starting from the very foundation.
So, let me ask you this. What really holds a society together? Is it just the laws on the books? Maybe it's culture? Well, the source material we're looking at today says the answer is actually a divine blueprint, one that touches every single part of life, from you as an individual to your family, all the way up to the entire community. Let's see how it all clicks together.
So where does a blueprint like this even begin? Well, it starts right at the heart of it all, the family. The whole idea here is that strong, healthy families are the absolute bedrock of a strong and righteous society.
The source zooms in on a really key term here, Qawwamun, which is used to describe the role of men. Now, it's often translated as protectors and maintainers, and the verse gives two specific reasons for this. First is what's described as a divine favor, or a kind of natural disposition, and second is the man's financial responsibility to provide for the family. Okay, so the text then addresses the really tough issue of nushuz, which is a term for serious marital discord, or when a wife is in a state of rebellion. But what's so important here is that the Qur'an doesn't just name the problem, it actually lays out a very specific, structured approach that's aimed at fixing things.
Now, the source is really clear that this is a step-by-step process, designed for reconciliation, not for punishment. It always starts with talking, with advice and counsel. If that doesn't work, the next step is a physical separation within the home. And only as a final resort, when everything else has failed, is a light symbolic strike mentioned, which is explicitly described as something that cannot cause injury.
So, from the family unit, the blueprint kind of zooms in on the individual. The focus shifts to your own personal connection with God through acts of worship that are seen as absolutely essential for purifying your soul and making your faith stronger.
And here's where we see a really important principle pop up. The faith is meant to be practical and merciful. Take, for example, the ritual washing with water, called wudu, which you need to do before prayer. But what if you can't? What if you're sick, or there's just no water around?
Well, this is where the concept of Tayammum, or dry ablution, comes in. It's a really practical solution that lets believers use clean earth to purify themselves in those situations. You just wipe your face and hands, and you fulfill the requirement. It ensures that prayer never becomes an impossible burden.
All right, let's zoom back out. The text now lays out the framework for the wider community. And here, it's all about the key principles you need for justice, for order, and for trustworthy leadership. You know, the pillars that hold a stable society up.
At the absolute core of this social framework is the idea of amanat, or trusts. This verse is a direct command to give trusts back to the people they belong to. And to really drive this home, the source points to the Prophet Muhammad himself, who is famously called al-Amin, the trustworthy, a title he earned even from his staunchest opponents. Building on that foundation of trust, the very next verse sets up a really clear hierarchy of authority. This is what creates a system for good governance and for keeping things in order within the community.
So let's break this down. At the very top, you obey Allah through the Qur'an. Second, you obey the messenger through his teachings, the Sunnah. And third, you obey the leaders from within the community. But, and this is the crucial part, their authority isn't absolute. If there's ever a disagreement, the final word always goes back to the Qur'an and the Sunnah.
Okay, now for any society to be truly just, it has to have clear laws for the most serious crimes. And the source explains that when it comes to the act of unlawful killing, Islamic law makes some really important distinctions based on intent.
This table lays it out pretty clearly. You can see how the consequence, the recompense, really shifts depending on the level of intent. For an intentional killing, there's both blood money and an act of expiation. For something semi-intentional, it's primarily the blood money. And for a purely accidental death, the penalty is less severe. See, it's not a one-size-fits-all system. It's nuanced, and it carefully weighs the nature of the crime.
So after walking through this whole blueprint for how to live, in your family, as an individual, and in your community, the text shifts to the final destination. What's the ultimate reward for a life of faith and obedience?
And this verse, wow, it offers such a powerful promise. It says that people who obey God and His messenger don't just get a reward, they get to be with the best of all creation in the afterlife. What amazing company to be in.
And here they are, those four favored groups: the prophets, the truthful, the martyrs, and the righteous. Now, if you're a Muslim, this probably sounds really familiar. It connects directly to the prayer said every single day: "Guide us to the straight path, the path of those upon whom you have bestowed favor." Well, this verse tells you exactly who those people are.
So what's the big takeaway from all of this? What does it all boil down to? The source finishes with this incredibly profound message. It points to a verse that basically asks, what would God gain by punishing you? It suggests that if people are simply grateful and truly believe, then punishment isn't the point at all.
And that leaves us with one final, and I think crucial, question to think about. We've just walked through a blueprint for family, for worship, for justice. So how can these principles, from over 1,400 years ago, still guide our families and our communities in the world we live in today? This explainer was prepared by the Ummah 360 team, and it's based on the Khulasatul-Quran for Par 5 by Maulana Muhammad Ilyas Kuman. If you found this helpful, you can find a lot more enriching content just like it by downloading our app from the Google Play and Apple App Stores. Thanks so much for joining us.